This book began with a simple observation. There's more intelligence inside our organizations than we are using. It led to the idea that there was a type of leader, those I came to call multipliers, who saw, used, and grew the intelligence of others, while other leaders, whom I labeled diminishers, shut down the smarts of those around them. I'm Mickey Mellon, this is Stacking Knowledge, and that was a bit from Liz Wiseman's book, Multipliers. So we're going to get into the multipliers versus diminishers, which is kind of the point of this book, and see what that looks like. So she'll start with the multiplier effect. The very first thing she talks about, she calls the problem with genius. Among other things, she says, quote, some leaders seem to drain intelligence and capability out of the people around them. Their focus on their own intelligence and their resolve to be the smartest person in the room had a diminishing effect on everyone. And then later, they talked about how perhaps these leaders understood the person sitting at the apex of intelligence hierarchy is the genius maker, not the genius. So you kind of have both sides there. You have the diminisher that thinks they're the smartest person and the multiplier that is going to create the smartest people, draw the best out of the people around them. They say further, the multiplier effect, they say multipliers get more from their people because they are leaders who look beyond their own genius and focus their energy on extracting and extending the genius of others. And then she'll get into one of her many lists in this book. This first list here is the 5 disciplines of the multiplier. So 5 things that multipliers do well. If you want to be a multiplier, these are kind of what happens. The 5 things are attracting and optimizing talent, creating intensity that requires best thinking, extending challenges, debating decisions, and instilling ownership and accountability. So attracting and optimizing talent, I think, is straightforward enough. But they say in here, people flock to work with multipliers because they know they will grow and be successful. The diminisher is an empire builder who acquires resources and wastes them. So when you have great talent, really talent will leave multipliers more often because they grow so much better. You know, I've talked about before with like college football coaches. The best coaches of all time, you can see the legacy of other coaches they've created that have gone on to do great things and even beat them at times. But it makes it better for everyone, whereas diminishers can just kind of hoard everything for themselves and just kind of waste that genius and not do well. It says the multiplier is a talent magnet who utilizes and increases everyone's genius. The second one, creating intensity that requires best thinking. The diminisher is a tyrant who creates a stressful environment. The multiplier is a liberator who creates a safe environment that fosters bold thinking. The third one here for the disciplines of the multiplier is extending challenges. The diminisher is a know-it-all who gives directives. The multiplier is a challenger who defines opportunities. Debating decisions. This is an interesting one here. Diminishers are decision makers who try to sell their decisions to others. Multipliers are debate makers who generate real buy-in. Multipliers are debate makers. So you want to have debate because, again, if you're surrounding yourself with brilliant people, you want to hear their input and take their ideas and often use them. And so it's a big difference there about how you debate decisions. And then instilling ownership and accountability is the 5th one in this list. The diminisher is a micromanager who jumps in and out. The multiplier is an investor who gives others ownership and full accountability. So the 5 disciplines: attracting and optimizing talent, creating intensity that requires best thinking, extending challenges, debating decisions, and instilling ownership and accountability. Other aspects of multipliers, they have a hard edge. They talk about how they look into people and find capabilities, so they want to access all of it and utilize people to their fullest. They see a lot, so they expect a lot. Multipliers aren't just feel-good people. They're people who are going to work you hard, but work you fair. Diminishers are going to work you hard and micromanage. Multipliers are going to expect a lot out of you. If you're awesome and they're going to make you be even awesomer, they're going to expect a lot out of that. They don't play small. They have a great sense of humor. And then they talk about the accidental diminisher at the end of the first chapter. And this is one that stood out to me a lot. It says, perhaps one of our biggest surprises was realizing how few diminishers understood the restrictive impact they were having on others. And just the idea of accidental diminisher, I think, is probably most diminishers. I don't think there's leaders out there that say, yes, I wish I'm not a multiplier, I'm a diminisher, that's what I am. No, they all think they're multipliers, but there's things you can do inadvertently to become a diminisher, and we'll talk more about that as we get in. So digging into the talent magnet, they start with a quote from Woodrow Wilson that says, I not only use all the brains that I have, but all that I can borrow. And that's a multiplier right there. Using brains you can borrow, getting the best of other people. Again, a diminisher is going to think they're the smartest person, and here are the people that are just going to do my bidding. But a multiplier is going to say, no, these are smart people. I'm going to use their brains. I not only use all the brains that I have, but all that I can borrow. They talk about the famous Ernest Shackleton advertisement he put, just trying to attract people because he was a multiplier. He put an advertisement in the Times in London, which was amazing. Here's what he put in the ad. He said, quote, men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. Like, that's brutal. It's something, but it stands out. People were attracted to that, and hundreds of men applied to join that. It was awesome. But again, because he's a multiplier, he's wanting to get the best out of people, but expect the best out of people. So he says, in the book here, Liz talks about the 4 practices of talent management. She says to look for talent everywhere, find people's native genius, utilize people to their fullest, and then remove the blockers. And so kind of unpacking those a little bit, you have look for talent everywhere, always look beyond your own backyard, appreciate all types of genius, ignore boundaries, like always just be looking for where that talent might be. Look for people's native genius. She says, quote, by native genius, I mean something even more specific than a strength or skill that might be highly rated on a 360-degree leadership assessment. A native genius or talent is something people do not only exceptionally well, but absolutely naturally. They do it easily, without extra effort, and freely, without condition. So what is the native genius in people, and how can you access that to make it work for you? They say utilize people to their fullest. I love the little quote here. She said, they were talking about a camp leader. I'll read the whole quote here. Marguerite then makes it clear to each person why she's been selected for that role. So Marguerite's the leader talking to the staff. Goes on in the quote here. She not only notices their talent, she labels it for them. One camp leader said, she tells me the talent she sees in me and why it matters. She tells me why girls' camp will be better because of me and my work. But Marguerite doesn't stop there. She lets everyone else know too. It is typical for her to introduce someone to the group by saying, this is Jennifer. She's a creative genius, and we're so fortunate to have her leading our art program. And that's just awesome. I mean, it shows how Marguerite thinks of things, but man, how does Jennifer feel when she gets introduced in a way like that? This is Jennifer. She's a creative genius. We're so fortunate to have her leading our art program. Like, everyone's better for that. Marguerite has a great team. Jennifer is fired up. The team respects both of them already. It's just a great way to lead things. It says get rid of the blockers. Remove the blockers, actually, in the first piece. That is, get rid of prima donnas. If you have people that think they're the best, you don't want that. You want to be working together. And then get out of the way. And again, this is a tough part. This is where diminishers want to control everything, and that limits things. They had a quote from C.K. Prahalad, who passed away like 15 years ago. He shared with me an old saying in India, and the saying is pretty short. It says, nothing grows under a banyan tree. And so the idea there is a banyan tree provides shade and is comfortable, but allows no sun for growth. And many leaders are like that. They protect their people to the point where nothing grows under them. So you want to be careful. You certainly want to protect your people. It's something I worked hard on, to protect them from just not evil clients, but bad clients and being mistreated and stuff. You also don't want to just protect them so much they can't grow. So how do you find the balance there? And that's really what this gets into. They talk about the diminisher's approach to managing talent. So if you were a diminisher, how would you try to manage talent? I won't get into details on these, but acquire resources, put people in boxes, and let talent languish. So it seems pretty obvious. The next one we talk about is the liberator, what it looks like to be a liberator. They share a quote to kick this off from John Dewey, who says, quote, the only freedom that is of enduring importance is the freedom of intelligence. That is to say, freedom of observation and end of judgment. And so what is it like to be a liberator? Free that up. One thing I loved here, she said in the book here, one corporate VP had a favorite saying, quoted often and written on her door. And the saying that was written there said, quote, ignore me as needed to get your job done. And I love that. Like, if you're needing to ask me something in order to get your job done, just get your job done. It's okay. And that kind of goes back to places like Four Seasons that give their staff kind of a stipend of money just to have. Like, if you need to spend, I think it's up to $1,000 to make a guest happy, just do it. Just make it happen. We have kind of a similar idea at Green Melon. Not $1,000, but I've told our developer, if it's under a couple $100, you need to help a client, do it. Just make them happy. Ignore me as needed to get your job done. Certainly, you need to talk to your superiors, and if you have bigger problems and stuff, but if you can just kind of take care of the people and just make it happen, be the liberator, and it works out great. Liberators also give people space to make mistakes. They say here's a fair trade that liberators offer. They say, quote, I give you permission to make mistakes. You have an obligation to learn from the mistakes and not repeat them. And so, letting people make mistakes, they should be making mistakes. If you have people never making mistakes, they're not trying hard enough, not pushing the boundaries. If they're repeating the same mistakes over and over, that's a different kind of conversation. So I give you permission to make mistakes. You have an obligation to learn from the mistakes and not repeat them. The three practices of the liberator are to create space. We kind of talked about that. Demand people's best work. I think we've already kind of talked about that. There was one great thing here where K.R. Sridhar talks about the distinction between pressure and stress. What's the difference between pressure and stress? Talks about William Tell shooting an apple off his son's head. Sridhar says, quote, in this scenario, just to talk about that, I guess, William Tell, there's a famous story of him shooting an apple off his son's head from some distance with a bow and arrow. So his son's sitting with an apple on his head and getting an arrow shot. That seems stressful for both. But is it pressure or is it stress? And so KR says, in this scenario, William Tell feels pressure, his son feels stress. And so keep pressure on the team to act, but don't control the stress. It's different to know the two. Pressure can be okay at times, but stress is not good. The other thing, a practice of a liberator, is to generate rapid learning cycles. Again, tyrants and liberators both expect mistakes. Tyrants stand ready to pounce on the people who make them. Liberators stand ready to learn as much as possible from the mistake. Learning can't happen without mistakes. There's a famous quote I've heard, I don't think it was in this book, but Henry Ford has said, those who never make mistakes work for those of us who do. They talk about the diminisher's approach to the environment. The diminisher, again, the side we don't want to be, they dominate the space, create anxiety, and judge others. But really kind of the highlights to become a liberator, they say to play fewer chips, let your team do things, label your opinions, let people know when it's an opinion or a fact, talk up your mistakes, don't hide your mistakes, and make space for mistakes, make mistakes for others. To summarize that chapter, it says, multipliers are intense. Leaders who can discern and create the difference between a tense and an intense climate can access significantly more brain power from their organization. Next, they get in the next chapter, chapter 4, is about the challenger. There's not a whole lot I took in this one, but here's a few things. They said, if leaders have to spread their intelligence across asking the questions and finding all the answers, they tend to ask questions they already know the answers to. Once a leader accepts that he or she doesn't have to have all the answers, he or she is free to ask much bigger, more provocative, and frankly more interesting questions. They can pursue things they don't know how to do. And so, if you're only asking questions of your team you already know the answers to just to kind of prove you're smarter or whatever, that's great. Well, I don't know what you're doing there. Ask questions you don't know, and you all kind of learn together and become all that much better. For challenges, they say there's 3 practices of that. There's seed the opportunity, reframe problems, kind of get things ready there. Lay down a challenge, ask hard questions, and generate belief. Make sure, orchestrate an early win is one piece they hit here for generating belief. Like if your team's a little worried, give them kind of an easy win early and then kind of build from there. But again, if they're asking hard questions, you frame the problem properly, then giving an easy win doesn't ruin things. It just kind of gets them off and running, and now they can ask better questions as they go. The diminisher's approach to this, of course, looking the opposite, telling people what they know, telling people what you know, and telling people how to do their jobs. None of that's really helpful. The debate maker is the next one in chapter 5. Joseph Joubert says, it is better to debate a decision without settling than to settle a decision without debating it. So it's kind of an interesting one. It is better to debate a decision without settling it than settling a decision without debating it. So coming up with a quick and easy answer seems, easier, but it's really not the way you want to go. You're better off to debate a decision and not quite settle it than to just settle for nothing. And there's an interesting way you can frame this too. I've seen this done before. I've tried this with our team a little bit, not a lot. I want to do this more. When you have an argument with people, have them switch positions. And so here's the quote Liz has in the book here. She says, when the discussion was beginning to reach a settling point, he pushed harder, asking people to switch sides and argue against their previously stated position. Chris, switch sides with Raza. Raza, you've been for this idea, now argue against it. Chris, now you argue for it. They would switch roles, which felt awkward for a moment or two, but soon they began to pound the issues from the other vantage point. It's kind of like the idea of a steel man argument. Everyone knows a straw man argument. You set up kind of a fake thing, say, here's what that other side believes. It's so dumb, and you can knock it down. A steel man saying, here's a real argument for why the other people believe that way. Anyone that disagrees with you on something has a good reason for it, a reason you probably don't agree with, but stand up that reason as strong as you can and then try to fight it. It'll make you all better for it. The 3 practices of the debate maker to frame the issue, just make it very clear there. They give an example here. They said a weak debate question would be, where should we cut expenses? A stronger one would be, should we cut funding for project A or project B? And that's going to be a debate right there. Spark the debate, demand rigor. And they talked about the switch, getting people to see from the opposite side. And drive a sound decision. Make a decision, communicate the decision, have a good process with your team to sort that out. The diminisher's approach to debate, of course, is to raise issues, to dominate discussion, and force the decision at the end, which, again, forcing a decision isn't good. I mean, as a leader, you need to make decisions at some point, but forcing that's not helpful. And again, arguing about it more, debating it more can be more helpful than even making the final decision in some cases. Another piece here I thought that was good about becoming a debate maker talks about the cost of an opinion is evidence. A quote from the book here said, as discussion leader, it was liberating to ask the questions but not give the answers. In fact, I found it strangely powerful. And when the students spouted off their views and interpretations of the story, it was thrilling to look them straight in the eye and say, do you have any evidence to support that claim? Initially, they looked terrified, but they quickly learned that the cost of an opinion was evidence. The cost of an opinion was evidence. And so I like that one. If someone's going to have an opinion, that's great. We should have opinions. Why do you have that opinion? What led you to form that opinion? Give me some evidence to back up what you have, at least the best evidence you can come up with, and go from there versus just, that's what I like. That doesn't really go too far in a lot of cases. Let's see. Going on to chapter 6 here, the investor. I love this quote from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, author of The Little Prince, among other things. But he says, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up the people to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. Love that quote. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. So if you have people just barking orders to get the wood and pound things together and get it done, you'll eventually get there. But man, if you have them just yearning to go sail, they're going to do a whole lot better and get things done because they're excited and eager to go get on this boat you're building and go through it. So the three practices of the investor are to define ownership, invest resources, and hold people accountable. So defining ownership, I think, is pretty clear. Give ownership for the end goal and stretch people to help get there. Invest resources. You want to teach and coach. Again, diminishers tell you what they know. Multipliers help you learn what you need to know. And then hold people accountable. Expect natural work and respect natural consequences. Expect complete work and respect natural consequences. Expect complete work, respect natural consequences. Yeah, so again, holding people accountable. How would a diminisher handle the investor? They would maintain ownership themselves. They'd jump in and out, and they'd take ownership of it back when they felt like it. And then a few things to help become an investor. They say give 51% of the vote. You can offer a strong piece of the opinion, but let your team ultimately decide whether you have the biggest share of it, but they still can have a lot there. Let nature take its course. Sometimes that can be okay, sometimes not. And give it back. Give back the role to them. Don't take it from them. Chapter 7, we get into the accidental diminisher I mentioned earlier. I've heard this a lot of different ways. The fundamental attribution error kind of talks about this, but this is a quote in the book here from Edward Wigglesworth. I never heard of him. It's an awesome name, Edward Wigglesworth. I can't even say it. He says, we judge others by their doings, but ourselves by our intentions. And so I see this a lot, again, with the fundamental attribution error. The easiest example of this is driving. If you're running late for an appointment, you're cutting through, you got to pick up your kid from school, you're kind of driving like a jerk and just cutting lanes, it's because I have this thing for school. But if anyone else is doing that, they're a jerk. They're inconsiderate, they're a jerk, they're being dangerous. What's their problem? So we judge others by their doings, but ourselves by our intentions. Why are we doing something? What did we mean to do? But anyone else, they did that, and therefore they're awful, dumb, whatever you want to get them for. The accidental diminisher profiles. There's a lot of different ways you can be an accidental diminisher. Again, this is very common where people think they're a multiplier and they're really not. So there's the idea fountain, who think they're creative thinkers who think they're stimulating ideas in others, but they're just coming up with ideas and doing that. Always on, charismatic leaders who think their energy is infectious and just never slow down. The rescuer, this is one I've fallen into. Empathetic leaders who are quick to help when they see people struggling. I see my team struggling. I want to get in and help them. I want to help my team when they're struggling with something. That can be problematic. Let them learn and grow. And it can hurt in a number of ways if you jump in and help. They feel worse you had to help. They don't learn lessons. It's tough, but also I want to do that. So it's one I struggle with. So you have the idea fountain, always on, a rescuer. The pace setter, achievement-oriented leaders who lead by example and expect others to notice and follow. Working 60 hours a week and expecting your team just to do the same. The rapid responder, leaders who are quick to take action, believing they are building an agile, action-oriented team. You got to be careful not responding too quickly. The optimist, who just think their belief in people will inspire them to new heights, which again could be true to a degree, but can make you a diminisher if you're not careful. The protector, vigilant leaders who shield people from problems to keep them safe. Kind of like the banyan tree. You're making sure your team is safe and they're not actually able to grow. The strategist, big thinkers who cast a compelling vision, thinking they're showing people a better place and providing the big picture. And again, having that's good, but you still got to listen to the team. And then the perfectionists who manage to find details to death, thinking they're doing this to produce superior work, but maybe driving people down. So it can be tough. So what if you're working for someone who's a diminisher? Chapter 8 is dealing with diminishers. They start with a quote from Stanley Kubrick, simply says, however vast the darkness, we must supply our own light. I like that one. Breaking the diminishing death cycle, it says. So breaking the diminishing death cycle. First one, it's not necessarily about you. They may be a diminisher and you're taking the heat of it, but it may not really be about you. There's a bad leader. Diminishing isn't inevitable. You may think that's just how it is. They're the boss. They tell me what to do. That's how it has to be, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can find the right situation. And then the third idea for breaking the diminishing death cycle is you can be your own, or you can lead your leader. You can help teach them the better way to go. Then they get into some defenses against the dark arts of diminishing managers. One is to turn down the volume. I love to quote here from Glenn Pethel, education leader from Georgia. Let's see. Has learned to manage frequent brushes with uncooperative colleagues. After these, people would ask him why he wasn't upset. Why aren't you mad? These people did a bad thing. Why aren't you mad about this? And he says, I love this. He says, because I don't want to be. Why aren't you upset? Because I don't want to be upset. He says, I don't want to be. Something caused this person to behave this way, and it wasn't necessarily me. Do I like it? No, but it's not going to dip from my bucket. So I love that piece. It's kind of like the book Unoffendable I recently read. I'll probably do a podcast in future weeks on that. But yeah, why aren't you upset? Because I don't want to be upset. Like, you don't have to be upset with things. I think there's kind of a glory that's been given to people. It's like, oh yeah, we're gonna have this righteous anger and be mad about things, and like there's maybe a place for that at times, but no, come on, just you choosing to be upset. It's how you react to things. Like, yeah, why aren't you upset? I don't want to be. I love that. If you have diminishing managers, you can strengthen other connections. It's not just about your manager. That matters a lot, but you have other connections. You can retreat and regroup, kind of reset yourself, send right signals back up, assert your capabilities, ask for performance intel, or shop for a new boss. I mean, you can shop for a boss in your company, or if it's bad enough, shop for a different company if you want to work somewhere else. I mean, having a bad manager can be rough for you all the way through, so it can be tough. But they also say there's 6 ways you can multiply up. So how can you kind of show multiplying signals back up the chain to this diminishing boss? One is to exploit your boss's strengths, figure out what they do best and lean into that. Give them a user's guide, try to guide them toward becoming a multiplier. Listen to learn, listen more to them to learn really what's going on. Admit your mistakes. And I can see how that can be a little dangerous depending if you have a diminishing boss who's always looking for mistakes to pounce on. Admitting mistakes could be problematic, but if done right, they'll see you own up to mistakes, and if you generally do good work and you still own your mistakes, that's a good thing. Number 5 here, sign up for a stretch. Try to look to do things to stretch your abilities further, and then invite them to the party. Explain what's going on here with multipliers and get them involved, which again, depending on your relationship, could be tough, but yeah, there's that. He also says, in this chapter, inspiring multiplier leadership in others. 3 things you can do to inspire that kind of leadership in other people. Assume a positive intent. This is a big one, especially with digital communications where a lot of it is written. Like, it's easy to take a tone with an email or read things funny. Just assume positive every time. If an email could be read one way, could be read the other, go with the positive one every time. It makes life so much better. Address one issue at a time. If there's a few things going on, don't just rattle off a list. Just focus on one thing. You've got time, work through there. And then celebrate progress. Celebrating progress is something I'm not great about. I was reading another book recently I'll be sharing about the benefits of celebrating progress, and that can be a great thing to do there too. So chapter 9, we're kind of getting toward the end here. Becoming a multiplier. Like, what does it mean to become a multiplier? 3 things they put in here are resonance, realization, and resolve. And I like the realization of the accidental diminisher. It's kind of the middle one here. Virtually all leaders have confessed they have seen some degree of diminishing behaviors in themselves. We gave that whole list of diminishing behaviors. I mentioned a few I saw in myself. There's probably a few you saw in yourself. And again, that's okay as long as you recognize that and can make changes to try to correct that and become a better person. So resonance, realization that you're an accidental diminisher, and then resolve to be a multiplier. You can start with assumptions, diminisher assumptions. Or actually, you should maybe not, but diminisher assumptions, diminishers always think people will never figure this out without me. Like, I have to just help them. They're never going to get it. They're dumb, they're lazy, whatever things you think. I just got to just help them and do it for them. Like, that's what diminishers think. Multipliers just assume people are smart and can figure it out. And so they lead with that mindset. And it's really, you'll see this in leaders. How do they lead? Do they think you're dumb, you're never going to figure this out, I got to hold your hand? Or you're smart, you can figure it out? Like, there's 2 very different types of people there. How does that work? 10 practices to hold a multiplier culture. So again, you're trying to be a multiplier. What are some things you can do? I like these 10 just brief practices here. 1 is to hold a book talk. Again, just try to make everyone better. 2 is discuss accidental diminishers. Maybe your team sees things and you didn't notice. They say, yeah, that 4th accidental diminisher, that sounds kind of like you. And really, I didn't realize they did that. Let's work on that. 3 is to introduce multiplier mindsets. 4 is to teach multiplier skills. 5 is to fuse multipliers with daily decisions, give them more power there. 6 is codify a leadership ethos. 7 is spotlight multiplier moments. I love that one. If you see people being a multiplier, call that out. Kind of like the example of Jennifer at camp before, calling out how great it's going to be because of this person. Measure managers, see what's really going on. Pilot a multiplier practice, start working on actually bringing it into practice. And then 10 is to integrate practices with business metrics. Measure some of that stuff against actual metrics. This had another story in here. I think I shared it in How to Know a Person a few weeks ago. It's also in the book, The Charisma Myths. This is the 3rd time I've seen this story, but I love it. It's a short one. It's great. So this one, in the book here, is paraphrased by Bono, the musician. He said, quote, "It has been said that after meeting with the great British Prime Minister, William Ewart Gladstone, you left feeling he was the smartest person in the world. But after meeting with his rival, Benjamin Disraeli, you left thinking you were the smartest person. This observation captures the essence and the power of a multiplier." So when you meet with someone, you want them to come out saying, wow, that guy I met with was so smart. You do want them coming out saying, after I met with that guy, I feel so smart. You want your team to feel great, feel empowered, feel smart. If they always just leave thinking you're so brilliant, or you think they're leaving thinking you're so brilliant, that's a diminisher all the way. So I think that's kind of a good way to end this here. You want to be like Benjamin Disraeli and leave people thinking they were the smartest person in the world rather than you are. So Multipliers by Liz Wiseman, fantastic book. Encourage you to check it out.